So today we're going to be talking about works cited pages and creating citations. So who here has either made a works cited page for a class or just made a citation for a class before? Okay, that's good. That's good. Always good to have a little experience prior to the lesson. So the formatting we're going to be looking at today is MLA 8th edition, which is the newest edition. In most classes you'll see you'll either use MLA or you'll use APA, sometimes Chicago, but usually you'll be using MLA, I would say, for the most part. So let's look at this template I've laid out on the board for you. So first things first, let's say you're doing a book, for instance. Of course, one of the most important things is the author. So, of course, the author will come first. So you'll have the author's last name, comma, their first name, and period. And what's the next most important thing, would you say, besides the author's name?
The name of the book.
That is right. So, as you may guess, the next thing that comes is the title of the book. And can you maybe tell me what may be different from how we write the title of the book compared to the author's name?
I don't know.
So with the title of the book, what you would do is you would italicize it, and then another period. So let's say you're out of room on that line. When you come down to the next line, you will indent by hitting tab, let's say. And after that, you'll have the publisher, comma, the year of publication, comma, and the page number. So let's say you use only pages 15 to pages 20. That's where you put that, and then a period. And that's your whole citation. Really, it's some people may think it's complex or it's difficult, but if you have the template laid out in front of you, or you just memorize how to do it, it's pretty simple. It's not that bad at all, I would say. And usually all of this information will be in the first few pages of the book. We'll have the author's name, the title, of course, the publisher, and the year of publication, all within the first couple pages of the book. So it's not that the information's too terribly difficult to find either. Overall, once you've practiced it a few times, it's pretty easy, I would say. So speaking of practice, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I picked a book, Divergent, to see if maybe after looking at this template, you can put it into practice for me. So what would you say comes first in the first line? How would you format it?
I would write the author's last name, Roth,
Right,
followed with a comma and her first name, Veronica,
right.
with a period at the end.
What else?
I would write the title, Divergent, in italics, and then a period.
Right.
If I have enough room, I'll continue with the publisher, Catherine Teagan Books. Or if I don't have enough room, I would go to the next line and indent.
Right.
I would comma with 2011, put another comma, and then list the pages I used.
That is exactly right. See, once you have the information, all it is really plugging in where it goes. Which is why, let's say, there are websites that are popular for this nowadays. Like one you may see people use a lot, Citation Machine. That's exactly how those websites work. If they find the information, and all they're really doing is plugging it in where it's supposed to go. That's all making a citation really is just plugging it in. So when you have the information, it's not too bad if you have the template in front of you, or if you have it memorized, which is even better. It'll save you a lot of time, flipping pages, going back to your notes, if you just have it up there in your head. So another question you need to ask yourself about citations is, why might a works cited page be important? Does anybody maybe have any guesses, any ideas, anything off the wall, really? What do you think?
It helps to know that you didn't plagiarize plagiarize the work.
That is right. One thing that is always super important is to never plagiarize. That's one of the golden rules when you're writing is do not plagiarize. And one of the greatest ways to make sure you don't plagiarize, is to cite your sources. Because citing your sources helps tell the reader that you've done the research that's required when you're writing about the topic, so you know what you're talking about. Not only that, is it gives credit to the sources and the authors that you used ideas from. And giving credit and letting the reader know you did your research is probably one of the two biggest main ideas for why I would say a works cited page is just super important. I can't really imagine a time where you'd be writing an essay in class using an article, say, or a book, and you're not using a works cited page. Pretty much it's one of the things you'll always be using when writing it. One that I would definitely emphasize getting some practice with, because you'll be throughout high school, you decide to go to college, you will be making a lot of works cited pages. So it'd be really good to familiarize yourself with how exactly to format it. So after we've looked at the MLA edition template and how to cite a source and put it into a works cited page, the next thing you want to ask yourself is what makes the source I'm using good? Is it a good source? What makes a good source? A good source. Or a better way you may phrase that question is what makes a source credible? That's the key word, credible. That's what you want to look for. Is why is my source credible? So there's a few questions you want to ask when looking at a source and see if it's credible or not. The first thing you want to ask is it in depth? How many pages do you have? Is it one page, a couple paragraphs, 5 pages, 10 pages? If it's like 1 page, 2 pages, a few paragraphs, you may want to steer clear, because it may not be as in depth as you may like, or may not be as in depth as whoever's reading it may like. When they decide to go through your sources. The next question is, who is the audience? Is the audience other students? Is it professors, scientists, the general public? Another important thing to ask is, what's the purpose of this article? Is it to entertain? Are they trying to make people laugh? Is it persuasion? Are they trying to, lean one way or the other? Or is it to inform? Which, an informative article or book is the best source you can have. You don't really want something that is entertaining or seeking to entertain or persuading. Informative is unbiased, which that's the problem with persuasion, is you want an unbiased article. That is super, super important. The next thing you want to ask is, who are the authors? Is it a doctor, a scientist, a professor? Have they written about this topic before? Are they familiar with it? What kind of credentials do they have is what you want to look for. Another thing you want to look for is the works cited page of the source itself, if it has one. If it has a works cited page and it has 1 source, 2 sources, it's not so great. That's 15, 20 sources, that is awesome. Because that tells you they've done the research. That's exactly why you're doing a works cited page, is you want to show that you've looked into the topic you're writing about, you've done the research. Whereas if someone has 1 source, 2 sources, it just doesn't show that kind of credibility in terms of research done that you want to look for. Another thing you want to look for is, how current is the article? Was it published this year? Was it published last year? Or was it published in, say, 1945? If it was published that long ago, it's not always a bad thing. If that's the only source you can, if it's good otherwise, you can still maybe choose that source, but more current, the source is usually a better thing. You want to be up to date. Let's say that source was good at the time, but new information has come about to where the information in the article just isn't accurate anymore. That's why it matters if a source is current or not. So, when you're looking for sources, some people go for Wikipedia, which other teachers have said this before. I'm sure you've heard this a lot. Do not use Wikipedia, which it's true. One is to be clear of Wikipedia, because as you know, anyone can edit Wikipedia, which they have gotten pretty good, about making sure that inaccurate changes are changed back. But that's the thing. You don't know if they've, looked at it and made sure it's correct. I just would not recommend looking at it at all. Or, well, there are other sources you could use or other forms of technology that would be great. Let's say Google. So when you think Google, you don't really think of it in terms of finding good sources for your essay, maybe. You should think more of the library, which the library is also a great way to find sources. But Google, let's say you're writing about frogs, and you want to find articles about frogs on the internet. Well, type in frogs on Google, you'll get pictures of frogs, videos of frogs, anything about frogs. But if you go on Google Scholar, it will show you peer-reviewed sources that have been looked at by other researchers, other scientists, professors, and they pretty much looked at this and said, this is accurate, this is credible. They've asked themselves all the questions we are asking ourselves now about whether or not this article is credible, and they've said, yes, this article is indeed credible. And if you're looking at a scientific journal, awesome. Most of the sources you'll find there will be great for whatever source you're writing about, as long as it's topical to what you're writing about. You want to be writing about frogs, and include a source about lions, for instance. Maybe you want to steer away from that because you want to be as close to the topic as possible when it comes to your sources. So, kind of leaning into that, finding sources on scholarly journals, is the URLs. So you have .coms, .govs, .edus, all sorts of URLs. So the ones you want to stick to, the ones that are the most important, are these .edu URLs. With the .com, it's any and every website for the most part, YouTube, Facebook, If someone is just making a website, it's probably going to be .com. Whereas .edus is where you'll find these scholarly journals or universities. These are like the credible sources. You'll find most of them on .edus. I kind of steered clear from .coms. So not all .coms are bad. I'm not trying to say that, but I would just stick with .edu because you'll more likely find credible sources there. So, can you tell me one question you would ask yourself when you're looking at a source to see if it's credible or not?
Well, first thing I would look at is actually the URL.
URL.
If it is a .com, it's usually not going to be credible.
That's right. Usually won't be as credible. Not always, but usually. Can you tell me any other things?
I don't know.
That's fine. So how about, what kind of purpose would you look for from a source? Informative, entertaining, persuasion, which one do you think would be best?
The best one would probably be informative.
That is correct, because you want it to be unbiased as possible. Because the persuasion, they're leaning one way or the other. That's very biased. And entertaining just is not what we're looking for. We want something that is just sticking to the topic, informing, and not just trying to tell jokes, make people laugh. That's what you want to go for, is informative. So, after looking at all this, I hope you have a pretty good idea of not only how to make a works cited page, but when you're picking your sources for your works cited page, what you want to look for. Because using this works cited page will be super important for when you're in high school, when you're in college, if you decide you want to take up being a professor, a doctor, or a scientist. Especially if you want to be a scientist, you will have to have these works cited pages to prove you've done your research. So getting yourself familiarized with this, getting some practice in on making sources, or finding sources for if you're writing an essay for a class, thinking of these things, keeping this stuff in mind, because it will really serve you well in the future if you're ever wanting to write an essay.